All right, it looks like we have 8 of you out there. Can you, someone in the chat, just let me know that you can hear me fine? Hey, Vanderhoff. Hey, Raiho. Raiho says, it sounds good, and if it made its way all the way up to Canada, then the broadcast has to be okay. I'm trying out StreamYard tonight. This should be the permanent place this broadcast lands. Hopefully it takes care of some of the hiccups we've had about bandwidth, because there is a regulator in this program. But if things get hairy around the 1 hour point, which is when I intend to be about done anyway tonight, I will let you guys know. I'm going to try and not have these videos end with just a sudden cutoff, as has almost become a tradition here on Visited by Voices Live. Piz is saying no audio at all. Jamie's saying I can hear you fine. So I'm going to probably side with the person who has better taste in Friday the 13th films. So Ryo had snow up in Canada. Well, you live in Canada, my man. Come to civilization. We'll take care of you, really. I mean, that said, last week I had snow too, but you know what? This week is a different week. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, great shirt, Lauren. This shirt was sent to me by Pizzowell after he insulted me with that Part 5 shirt. He made up for it by sending me a couple of Friday 13th shirts. And I have to say, this is from his TeePublic store. And I have to say, when the shirt first came, it's very soft. It's a great shirt. The print seemed like it was a little glossy. But after a few washes, it absolutely looks perfect as it should. So if you get something from his store and it's not absolutely perfect out of the box, don't freak out. Don't send him hate mail. You know, don't fly down to Kentucky with a pair of brass knuckles. All you need to do is wash it a few times, and I promise you it will be okay. It's not going to make like a Roy short look good, but any design will look proper on the shirt. So today I just wanted to talk about a few things that are going on, and I wanted to just talk with you guys. So you guys really control the conversation. You control the horizontal and the vertical here. But there's a few things going on I'd like to talk about. I might want to show you a few things I have just around the room, because that always seems to get a great reaction. And I want to talk a little bit to start with where this channel is going. I did put a video up this week that was exactly like 1 minute 14 seconds long. And I hope all of you watched it. It's gotten a lot of hits for what it is. So I have to think that you probably did. So the direction for the foreseeable future is that I'm not giving up on anything I'm already doing. But the reality is this channel needs to bring in more voices to start this community talking. And this channel is really just a part of a network of people who are trying to start this conversation. And I think it's going to be a very positive thing. That does mean you guys need to be listening to more than just me talking. And I think you'll all appreciate having more than just me talking too. So there's going to be guests on the show starting next Monday. My intention is for 3 shows a week, each with a guest. And then monthly, I'd like to have shows that bring in many of those guests. So, Jamie, I cannot wear that Part 5 shirt with pride because I mailed it to someone who'd actually appreciate it. So starting next Monday, we're going to have guests, and there will be one-on-one conversations. And the general theme of the conversations, no matter who my guest is going to be, how has the horror genre informed your life? A lot of us have been through tough times. A lot of us have gone through times when we felt pretty lonely, or perhaps, maybe we have a little bit of depression, or maybe we have other problems. Maybe we've been through serious medical things. And I will tell you for myself, this is not a movie, so hang with me for a second, but I was really sick at one point in my youth, and we years later realized it was probably a case of Lyme's disease, which I've had twice now because I'm that lucky and I live with deer. And I was really sick. I was bedridden, and nothing made me feel good except I had a Walkman and I had a cassette of the first 45 Grave album, Sleep in Safety. And I'm not kidding. I'm not being hyperbolic at all when I say when I put that tape in and pushed play, the album started, I started feeling better. And I discovered something that day is that whenever I'm feeling down, the smartest thing I can do is rush to the things that make me feel good. And they shouldn't biologically have any reason to make me feel better. They're not medicine. But yet they work better than any medicine I've ever bought over a counter. I've had the opposite effect too. The first time I saw the original Phantasm, I was really sick. And for a while there, I mean, years, and whenever I watched Phantasm, I would get uncomfortable because I remember how sick I was when I watched it. Did get over that. And I never thought it was the film's fault. I always liked the film. I felt a certain way when watching it. So I want to see if it would be a similar experience for other people who have devoted themselves in small part or in large part to the horror genre. And the guests will be everything from panelists that have appeared on other shows with that you're familiar with, to people who are creators, maybe in film or in literature. I've already lined up pretty much the first month, and I think I have some names that are going to impress you guys. I want to announce them one by one as the shows are coming up. I don't want to put a schedule out there, but I will say I'm aiming for the stars with this. I'm not going just for the easy gets. We'll see how successful it is after this month, but I have a few that I think are going to start off the series that I think you're going to enjoy and maybe be a little bit surprised when you hear their stories. So I would love to hear your stories, though. That's where this is all really going. I keep talking about community and conversation. I'd love to know your stories, too. And maybe the chat isn't the easiest place to put those stories, but it's a start. And I'm not opposed to it. If you follow me on Twitter, send me your story, man. If it's compelling, if it's really compelling, I'm not going to say compelling enough because that's a little, who am I to decide? But if you have a story and I think it would really suit the show, maybe we'll bring you on and maybe you can share with the community. I don't want this to get so personal it's uncomfortable for anyone, but by the same rate, I think there's something worthwhile about discussing about why we love this genre in particular. Because I'm going to tell you, I've never felt this way watching a mystery or a science fiction film. And I know for a lot of people, they can run to Star Wars or Star Trek, or and that's their thing that makes them feel like this. But us in this community, we're drawn to the Friday the 13th films, the Halloween films. For myself, a lot of 30s horror films, and there has to be a reason for that. It's just not random. There's something in our DNA coding, and I'd like to explore that with you. Hey, Steak Sauce, how are you, sir? And hey, Andrew, thanks for joining. Andrew says, whenever I watch WrestleMania 9, I think of cheap bear claws because that's what I ate the first time I saw it. That's a little bit like what I'm talking about, right? If you could can you still taste those bear claws? Jamie, the shirt that I was sent, it would be more like a tent than a shirt for you, I think, because I think it's safe to say that I'm quite a bit larger than you are, and that would not have worked out. All right, so with that out of the way, and I hope everyone is excited, I'm going to ask a favor of you, and then I'm not going to ask it again. Well, not for this broadcast. If you know someone who you think would be a good participant in this conversation, whether that's just watching the show, whether it's coming on the show, whether it is someone who has talked to you about something you find really relevant to this conversation, please send them my way. Yes, I need subscribers. I need to get this bigger, but that's not what I'm talking about. I just want to build a community for us so that every day that you guys want to go online and find someone talking about your favorite things, you can. Because I can't be there all day. Piz can't be there all day, every day. But I think if we build a network of voices, we're going to have constant entertainment, and entertainment we care about. That's the other thing. I'm not a guy who can turn on a television and watch whatever comes on. Can't do it. I don't think you guys are either. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching me when you have so many entertainment options at the flick of a television dial. That was a horrible metaphor. That wasn't even a mixed metaphor. It just didn't make sense. I'm ashamed of myself. Crystal Lake Counselor says, the first horror film I saw was Psycho 2, hiding behind the couch so my dad wouldn't catch me as he watched it when I was 8. So interestingly, we're not that far off in age. Psycho 2 came out in 82, right? 82 or 83? So I was either 9 or 10 when it came out, and my parents took me to the theater because they'd said no to going to see Friday the 13th Part 3 the year before. So that was the makeup film. All right. So in the news today, let's talk about Adam Donahue. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but this news broke early today. Didn't really gain much traction until this evening, but now it's all over the place. Basically, Adam Donahue, and I might be mispronouncing his name, but I don't think we have to worry about respecting that guy's pronunciation at this point or anything else about him. He's a producer, and in the last 5 years, he's really turned his attention over to the horror genre. Hey, Heartbreaker. I mean, in recent years, he's produced a lot of things you probably are very aware of. VFW, Satanic Panic, that Fangoria movie porno that we're all a little bit afraid to watch, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, and before that, that Casey Affleck film, A Ghost Story, which we all kind of thought wasn't probably a horror film, but we weren't really sure, so we didn't watch it, right? But anyway, this is a guy who's a player in the horror scene now, a significant way. And, well, today he was brought up on charges of imperiling the morals of a minor. Basically, it's a Texas statute that runs parallel with statutory rape, and he'll probably end up with that charge too. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police officer, but usually one follows the other. And it looks like a casting couch situation. And the girl was 16. She has not been named for obvious reasons. Now, if this is just coercion, in many states, including the one I live in, it wouldn't even violate statutory rape laws because 16 is the age of consent in Jersey. And the Juliet law doesn't work the way people think it works. So he probably would have been okay. But if you go to Reddit and look at the case, you're going to see that a lot of people have had problems with him on a similar basis on the past. So while I'm all for giving people the benefit of the doubt, guilty until proven innocent, this seems like a bad player. And Piss says, don't you dare badmouth Bloody Disgusting. It's like he read my script, which is really just a few random notes drawn in a bad ballpoint pen. So here's the thing, guys. This guy has been a partner in recent years with both Fangoria and Bloody Disgusting. And both the current incarnation of Fangoria and Bloody Disgusting have gone really far out of their way in recent years to be very, very, very politically correct, to jump on the bandwagon of a lot of social justice causes. And if you know me, you know that I actually am very sympathetic to the idea behind all those social justice causes. I just find people's behavior to be fairly obnoxious when they get deeply into that as a crusade. So it's not the message I hate. I just usually find the messengers to be like psychotic in a way that I don't appreciate. But I'm disturbed. Like when a company has kind of made inroads in their fan base and actually divided up their fan base over these issues because they feel that their personal politics are so important that they're going to plant a flag and they're going to die on that hill. You got to hold a high standard with the people you hire. And again, if you go back to Reddit, you notice that there's been lots of complaints, and it's kind of like an open secret. This guy was, not a good player. So how does that happen? If you really care, if your values as a company are really so stringent about representation and about making sure people are treated properly and there's no discrimination on the basis of gender, all that's noble, by the way. But when you're putting that out there as part of your identity of your company, how do you have this guy working for you? How does that happen? Where I'm really leading with this is not just to bash these companies. And it's not just to say that maybe we should divorce our overt politics from the genre because nothing good can come of it. Although you could draw all those conclusions and I'd probably support all of it. That's not where I'm going. Where I'm going is this. We've had bad players in the genre before. Whether we're talking Jeepers Creepers or we're talking Rosemary's Baby, there's been people who are problematic that have worked in the horror genre. And it creates a narrative that we don't need as a genre. There's enough people looking down their nose at us, thinking that we're basically watching a form of pornography. We do not need players like this in our scene, and yet we're going to have them, right? It's inevitable that we're going to have them. Just like the Catholic Church, they have so many priests that you're going to have some bad apples. The key is we can't just move them to another parish the way that the Catholic Church has. We have to call these people out. We got to make sure it doesn't happen, especially those companies that have gone so far out of their way to proselytize about this exact subject. It's not okay. We can't just look over our shoulders and say, well, how would they know what was going on? It's their business to know what's going on if that's so central to the character of their company. So I am asking all of you, just let's make sure that we're supporting the good guys. I'm not saying you not to go see Jeepers Creepers 8 when it comes out. I'm not saying that, but I am saying, like, make sure you're supporting the good guys first. The people who've gone out of their way to support the genre at the lowest points, make sure they're getting your money first. And these guys, maybe not. Consider before you purchase. I'm not saying ban or boycott. I'm not saying blacklist, but I'm just saying use your wallet to support the people who deserve to be supported, because there's a lot of great artists working out there who are getting steamrolled by people who don't deserve it. I will tell you as a funny aside that when I Googled him to see all of his projects in work, he had produced and it's already shot, a remake of Castle Freak. I didn't even know that was happening. And so this guy's actually part of that wave too, because at first when you look at his lineup, there's a lot of original titles there. It seems like, well, I'm always talking about original titles. Maybe this is the way it should go. Maybe this guy has his personal problems, but he's doing good for the genre. But it turns out he's going where the money is. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of great horror films have come out of just the utilitarian position of what will make me cash. But in this case, considering who he is, apparently, I don't know, by reports, I don't think this is a guy we should give a dime to or the light of day. Let's let him go figure it out on his own after whatever jail cell he spent some time in. All right. Let me go through some comments because I've been spieling for a while here. Pizzawell says, horror is dead, deal with it. Spoken like a true fan of the genre. Steak Sauce says, we don't expect much out of you. Well, that means I'll always exceed your expectations, sir. Heartbreaker says, I really don't care what he's done. He's created a lot of good movies, and that's all that matters to me. That's certainly a take. And I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm going to say, though, how about the great artists who have not done these things, who don't get the opportunities? Are we okay supporting the people who've done questionable things, getting opportunities first? Because this accusation is in a string of accusations. This is just the first time there's been badges and lawyers involved. Vanderhoff says, my best part of the day is after work watching a horror movie with a delicious IPA. Sir, I don't drink, but that sounds like a perfect evening. However you unwind, man, make a good horror film part of it. Andrew says, bloody disgusting. Man, I can't get behind their social media presence, just being honest. You know what? There was a time when I really liked them. But that's so far in the rearview mirror now that it's getting hard to see what I once saw in them. It's kind of like the girl you date too long, right? And you were never right, but for whatever reason you stuck around, and eventually you're looking over your shoulder going, has it really been 8 years? Piz says, now you're bad-mouthing the Catholic Church. Sir, that could happen on a regular basis. Steak Sauce says, sorry, I only help the bad guys. That is why your line of professional work is where it is, sir. Heartbreaker says, I'm a good, you should support me. Based on your last comment, I don't know. I mean, show me a film, a book, a comic book, a song. Show me something you've created, and I probably will support you, sir. The more voices we have in this genre, the better. We just got to make sure we're supporting the best people too, because the best people are going to produce the best work too. By the way, that's how that works. Orc, hello. I got to remember these numbers after your name because I never do. Orc 145626. Everyone has their problems and issues. Just be loyal and smart. Issues are one thing. Victimizing other people is a different thing to me. Jamie says, I hate to say it, but abusers are everywhere. That is very, very true. Our genre, to some degree, exists to put violence in its proper perspective. These people who let it spill into the real world don't seem to understand that. And that's why they're bad players. Steak Sauce says, holy shit, Ord. It would have been Orc in a better world, but it's Ord today. Arthur Bates says, hello, Lauren. What do you think of this Tony Scott film, The Hunger? I think it's fairly boring, but it's beautifully shot. It has some great music, some really tremendous lighting, but it's dull as hell. Orc says, I don't know, but I'd let people eat before me. And I have. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, but I worked in some pretty rough neighborhoods, and I used to walk from one of the retail stores that I worked, that I helped coordinate the business of. And I used to walk the streets of Paterson, New Jersey. It's a rough town. It's maybe the roughest town in Jersey. Maybe Camden. It's close. But I can't tell you how many times on the way back, if I would just drop a bag of fast food at the homeless guy's feet. I mean, I can't even tell you. It happened. Crystal Lake Counselor says, Lauren, would you recommend The House That Jack Built? I've heard mixed reviews. I still haven't seen the whole film, so I can't. Look, Ventura is one of those guys that probably is worth your attention, even when he fails. His early stuff I really, really like, back when he was working with no money and stretching it as thin as possible. But I haven't followed him as closely as I probably should, to be honest. Heartbreaker says, it was a joke, man. I do plan on creating a fan film, though. You can support it at www.idon'tcare.com. Well, here's the thing, man. I actually would love to see what you'd create. And I'm not being facetious. I would love to see what you create, because sometimes the most unlikely sources end up creating great work. So, I mean, if you make a fan film and it turns out to be the best fan film ever made, I'll be your biggest supporter. No question about it. Andrew says, I don't know, man. Some of my all-time favorite movies are Polanski films. The Pianist, the Tenet, Repulsion. I don't feel guilty enjoying these movies or that I advocate for his crimes. I'm not a hardcore anti-Polanski guy. People know that I have a bigger problem with, Landis than I do. But I would say that it's hard for me to it's not, in his case, it's not terribly hard to separate, because the art is no longer, there's not, new films coming out on a regular basis. And I never liked Woody Allen films to begin with, so I don't have a problem with that. But separating the artist from the art is a good policy. But again, I think there's artists that aren't contaminated out there, that aren't getting the spotlight. And I think there's a simple answer there. And that's really all I'm saying. Borderline 11. No, wait, I missed something. I'm falling behind here. All right. Steak Sauce says, Patterson obviously spent some time there, sir. You can attest that it's not exactly paradise on earth, right? Chris Lake Counselor says, is it official that Kevin Williamson is writing Scream 5? I haven't really been following it because I'm not a Scream fan at all. I would assume he's involved. I mean, why wouldn't he? It's his calling card. Orc says, if you say you have faith and you're not loyal, I don't care either. Guy is gonna go play games. Love you guys, gonna play games. I think that the issue of fidelity is an interesting one because people can betray your trust, but you have to know someone's heart, and you can't take simply words always as the be and all. Everyone speaks out of turn. Everyone can annoy even the best people in their lives, and we find a way through our relationships to deal with that. I don't like when people physically abuse other people. I do draw a line there, period, or are reckless with other people's safety or health. I have issues with that. Again, that's not saying people can't redeem themselves, but people got to want to redeem themselves, and the first part of recovering from any of that is admitting how badly wrong you were. So we'll see. Maybe Donahue can have an amazing story of how he turned his life around in the future, but right now I'm just not all about supporting everything he does. Borderline 11 says it's a Friday 5 fan film. I kind of think that there's a good chance it'll look more professional than the real film. Arthur Bates says, I very much agree with your take. Stunning visuals and barely any plot. Okay. I'm not sure what we're referring to, but I'm good with it. Sounded positive. Orc says, a beautiful mind, don't waste it with pharma. Unfortunately, I'm not completely I'm not completely free of prescriptions, but I try and stay off as much as I can. And this chat is starting to really move. I'm having a little bit of trouble following. Heartbreaker says, I do plan on making a fan film, and trust me, it will be the best. It's just a Punisher fan film. It's not going to be horror. It's going to be more action, but it will be good. If you've seen any of my videos, Heartbreaker, you know that I consider the genre to be based on the emotions it evokes. So you could make a Punisher fan film that I would consider horror pretty easily. Very easily. In fact, I'd say Punisher Warzone is damn close to being a horror film in its intentions. Jamie says, Andrew, you have a good point. I really do love Polanski's work. Someone being an asshole abuser doesn't mean they don't have talent. I can respect his talent. Sure, you absolutely can. And, my thing is when there's people who've created just as great work, we should be talking about them just as commonly. So, rogues don't look back should be discussed as much as repulsion is, and it's not. And there's someone who didn't victimize anyone. Orc says GG, which I have no idea what means still after years of hearing it. Darren Barrows says, hi, Lauren. Talking of Paterson, New Jersey, are you a fan of Alice, Sweet Alice? I am. It's a film you don't find yourself watching at the drop of a hat because it's pretty heavy, right? But it's really, really, really good. Steak Sauce says, Lauren, fan film begins production in September. Believe me, no one's making a fan film about me. Orc says, I'll watch the VOD later, though I promise leave it live. Vanderhoff says, sometimes my GPS takes me through downtown Patterson and I lock the doors and bolt the windows. Here's the thing. If you treat everyone with respect in Patterson, you really won't have problems. There's a lot of really great people in Patterson, but it is a rough neighborhood. And you must keep yourself to a high standard of treating people with respect, because if you don't, you are in trouble. It is a community that has some extraordinary challenges. Heartbreaker says, Heartbreaker says, I always had the perspective that you have to separate the art from the artist if you ever want to enjoy a medium. There are lots of bad people out there who make amazing movies and everything. Yeah, but there's also a lot of great people who do. And I don't think it's okay to blanket absolve people just because they're artists is not okay. I do think that it's completely acceptable to say if someone abuses children and they're a filmmaker, they do their time. No film company should be ever okay with them working with children again. Am I wrong? So I think it's socially responsible that if people make mistakes, that we hold them socially accountable for those mistakes, depending on the severity of their infraction. But I think it's completely reasonable. The Steak Sauce says, y'all are too paranoid in New Jersey. I'm not paranoid. I've walked every bad street in the state. Orc says, I'm paranoid of bad people. Yeah, It's probably a good thing to be paranoid of. Welcome to my game. Heart to you all. Real talk, period. From the heart. Andrew says, Lauren, I can't think of your cat's name, but I see him. Moon Shadows, Shadow Star. Well, the cat you're seeing is actually Kazi from Kosovo, who's a rescue cat from one of the poorest nations in Europe. Stormcloud is downstairs sleeping at the moment. She might show back up. Steak Sauce says, I'm paranoid of the ghost of Ord. I think you need to be paranoid of actually just Orc, to be honest. Crystal Lake Counselor says, Lauren, do you live near the prison they used to? Do you live near the prison used in the film Lock Up with Stallone? I do not. Okay. Jamie says, me too, Orc. Bad people suck. Yeah, it's kind of the definition of it, right? Arthur Bates. Hello, Arthur Bates. What do you think of the film A Scanner Darkly? So I think that it's a Philip Dick adaptation, I believe. I saw it when it was in theaters and I haven't seen it since. I remember that kind of constant animation style eventually got to be, rather than fading away, it got to be distracting from what I think. I almost feel like the film would have been stronger if it was a conventional film, because I think that the story was really compelling and the style just sort of got in the way. Not to the point that I couldn't enjoy it, but I think it's one of those films I would have liked them to step back and just be a little bit more passive about. Orc agrees that bad people suck. And let's see, I'm almost caught up. Heartbreaker says, GG means good game. Oh my God, I can't believe I have to explain this to someone. Well, this might have something to do with the fact that I do not play video games and I don't play online streaming video games. Or it could be that I'm just ancient. I don't know. But thank you for helping me with the definition. I'll be sure to reach out to you every time I don't understand an internet abbreviation ever again. You're my guy, okay? Stick Sauce says Brian Peck disagrees. Heartbreaker by what they did. Okay, Chris Lake Counselor says Stronger series, Freddy's Nightmares, or Friday 13th the series. That is not a serious question, sir. Friday 13th the series works for what it is. It's completely a different monster than the films, of course, but as small, cheaply made Canadian lensed gothic horror stories, they work. There's some great episodes. The Faith Healer episode that Cronenberg did is outstanding. The Scarecrow episode is really good. The finale for the second season is one of the best, should have been a series finale ever on television. It does have low points. And I love the time travel vampire story where the halfway through they go back to black and white and it becomes a Hammer movie. I love that. Whereas Freddy's Nightmares is pretty bad. It was cheap, and above that it was kind of nonsensical a lot of times. The plots just kind of have stopped worrying about narrative at a certain point and just became random weird images. And it always felt like the actors were not given the time to prepare for their roles because they all feel wooden, even if they're good actors and actresses. It just feels very rushed to me. And it, I won't lie, I'm not a fan of the Freddy thing from the sequels onward. And there's some goofy intros there, and that's exactly the opposite of what I like in Freddy. I like Freddy as a dark character. Okay, Cam is here. Hey, Cam. If you could have directed one Friday the 13th film that already exists, which one would you want your name on? How would you make it closer to your sensibilities? So that's a complex question because it's not asking what my favorite is, right? It's almost asking me which one would I like to salvage. Well, I'll tell you one. The one I think I could probably overhaul into something that would be a lot more satisfying would be Jason Takes Manhattan, because I think that film's failures are regrettable because I think the DNA of that film is not bad, which is Jason on a boat. Manhattan is setting it in Manhattan itself is a weird, problematic idea that's good for images, but it's not really good for plot. But that boat is a great claustrophobic setting for a slasher film. but there would be a lot of things, like it would actually be a cruise ship and not some kind of weird transport vessel that they're claiming is a cruise ship. I wouldn't have connected Crystal Lake to the ocean. I made it much darker. I would have got rid of all the ironic deaths and replaced them with just kind of just hardcore, surprising, sleight of hand type of trick deaths, like the series first 4 films did all the time. Look over here and the violence comes from over here. Where that film is just, oh, this guy almost accidentally drowned his niece, so he drowns in a bottle, in a barrel in New York, or it's just constantly like trying to be ironic. The vain girl is killed with a shard of mirror. It just feels so much like it's trying hard. And the Friday series is always better when it's very natural and you don't see the strings of a writer who thinks they're being clever. Crystal Lake Counselor asks, how old is Jason supposed to be in part 2? And was Alice near Crystal Lake to deal with her trauma, or was that her permanent residence? Well, we know it wasn't her permanent residence because she talks about going back home to California in the first film. She says she might have to go back. And we get the impression that she's actually playing with Steve Christie, that she's not really going to leave, but it's kind of like a playing hard to get thing. Something happened between them. She's not completely sure of it. So maybe she's laying the breadcrumbs that if she wants out, that's her out, without having to create a confrontation. Why is she there? Well, the novelization says exactly that she returned to Crystal Lake in order to be able to pick up the pieces of her life. The movie doesn't make it clear, and it doesn't really bother me that much. At that point, nothing had really been established in the film universe of Friday the 13th to make it improbable that she'd come back or that Jason would wander into town, how he'd know where she was living, etc. It's really meant just to bookshelf the first film, and for that, I'm fine with it. I think those first 4 films have a very dreamlike quality, and they all end with someone waking from a dream, which is not a coincidence. So, I mean, logic isn't really what I'm worried about. Does it have that kind of urban legend campfire, gravity to it? Does it feel like a story that's been told by friend, like a game of elephant? That's what those films should feel like. And starting with the 5th film onward, they don't feel like that anymore. And that's the big failure, to my mind, of the long-running series. Those first 4 films really do really well about kind of bottling up all that anxiety that comes with nightmare logic. And then, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they just don't. To the point where we get to Freddy vs. Nightmare, which is literally a comic book on screen. Piz says the problem with part 8 is they didn't let Danny Steinman write and direct it. I'm going to let that sink in for everyone. I'm just going to let that sink in. Steak Sauce says, I'd like to drown in a bottle right now. Well, if you want to take one of my misstatements as a way to die, I could probably do better. Cam says, most camp counselors, Crystal, don't travel out of state to the location, but usually live near the area to begin with. Yeah, that's true, but that line of dialogue in the first film kind of makes you not quite sure of it, And by the way, all the other camp counselors come from out of town in the first film too, and the second film. So I don't know. Darren Barrow says, if you could interview anyone in horror genre, living or dead, who would it be? Well, this channel is going to be conversations. It's not going to be interviews. But one person who's agreed to come on is literally one of the top people I would name to answer your question. So for living people, I'm going to try and make that happen. For people who are no longer with us, H.P. Lovecraft, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Aquanetta, Esperu Aquanetta. Probably those, we'll stick with those as the big guys, because I'm going to get real obscure and you guys just don't care at that point. I'm way behind at this point, so I'm just going to jump back in with Heartbreaker asking, who the hell is Danny Steinman? That's a question I ask every day of my life, Heartbreaker. I think we just became friends. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, so technically Friday 13th Part 3 is Saturday the 14th. That is true. The second, third, and fourth films take place over the course of 3 days. So there you go. Steak Sauce says, Denny Steinman was a math teacher in my high school who was kicked out for a peephole. I'm not reading the rest of that, Steak Sauce. That's more than you needed to share. Mr. Bombasket, hello, Mr. Bombasket, says, well, there's only one thing I know for sure. Aliens is a fucking great movie. I'm glad you enjoy it. I really am. Feel free in the chat to give me in as many lines as you need how Burke's plan makes absolutely any sense. Heartbreaker says steak sauce. Steak sauce that would be Toby Hooper. Okay. Borderline 11 is answering Heartbreaker. And again, I didn't realize he worked in so many high schools. I mean, Danny Steinman got through the country, didn't he? All this filming is healthy. Elsa Lanchester. So, okay. Here's the deal. I love Bride of Frankenstein, my favorite film. No question about it. Elsa's barely in the movie. And she cuts a great image on screen. But she's not the reason the movie's great. She's the reason her scenes are great. Boris Karloff, is Colin Clive, James Whale. Those are my big heroes of the film. I wouldn't mind talking to Elsa Lanchester. That's absolutely true. But I don't think she was really the creative spirit on Bride of Frankenstein. There's a lot of great reasons to love Bride of Frankenstein. Heartbreaker says, if anyone who directed a Friday the 13th movie direct Part 8, I would have the guy who directed Part 4, not Danny Steinbeck. Danny Steinbeck, I love that. That it's disturbing and would piss off every classic literature professor in the country. Who did a halfway decent job in Part 5. I disagree with the last half of that sentence, though. Piz, I think, had a stroke because there's just random letters instead of a comment. It starts with Heartbreaker, but I don't know. He's like in a different language, speaking in tongues. Nico Mendez, Santiago, have you watched the Lombard Supernatural yet? P.S. Aquanetta is right in my wheelhouse. Dead Man's Eyes, 44 Rules. Dead Man's Eyes is by far the best of the Inner Sanctum Mysteries, and she's a big reason why. If you don't know what the Inner Sanctum Mysteries were, it was a radio show that was turned into a series of films by Universal, and they were all meant to promote Lon Chaney Jr. as their next big horror star. And Dead Man's Eyes stars Aquanetta from Captive Wild Woman in a major, major role. And she's way better in it than she is in the Captive Wild Woman films, though I love Captive Wild Woman more. It is awesome. To answer your big question, yes, I did watch Supernatural with Carol Lombard, and that transfer is just amazing. Amazing transfer. It's one of the best restorations I've ever seen for any film. And I just love the fact that Kino Lorber cared enough to do it, because I can't understand how they expected to make their money back. It's an amazing. If you guys want to see a great possession thriller from the golden era of horror, it is top of the. It's going to surprise you by how beautiful and lyrical that movie is. It's as good as the genre was at that time. It's awesome. Okay, Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, I've always wondered why Friday 5 had the highest body count in one film by time for a time by an imposter Jason. Can't support that. The imposter Jason side of it is not what bothers me. Everyone rushes to that, thinking that's why people don't like it. It's just that it doesn't have mood or atmosphere. It doesn't really understand why the formula works. It just kind of parrots kind of a simplified version of the formula, and it's not what I want. That said, like, people who love the film, I get it. I really do. I just wish it was titled something else, and then it would be a film that maybe I just dismiss, like so many slashers that came and gone in the 80s, but when you attach the Friday title of it, I expect a certain level above. And for me personally, Friday 5 doesn't give that. It just doesn't. And I've said it a million times before, comedy usually doesn't work for me. There's so much comedy in that movie, and all of it doesn't land. All of it misses its mark for me. So maybe it's just natural that I don't like the film, and that someone who likes comedy, would like it. I also think that, of the first four, the third film was my least favorite because, and again, that movie has the most comedy of the first four. I don't think that's a coincidence. But I think the third film is undeniably a better made film than Part 5. Piz is still talking about his high school gym teacher. Heartbreaker says, Piz, I think there's probably an inside joke, so I won't argue with you. That's probably best. Pizwell is Piz. I might not be the biggest of Mice and Men fan that you'll ever meet, but there's no justifying that statement. All right. Darren Bro says, did you see 13 Women 1932 After? I hear it's possibly one of the earlier proto-slashers. It's not really a slasher. I'm not new to the movie. I would actually say it's more like the Heathers of its time, because it has a really wicked sense of humor about what it's doing, and it was very subversive for its time. Definitely worth seeing. It's a Warner's Archives title, so it's not expensive, but it's DVD only. There's no blue, and we'll never get a blue of it. So I support it, though. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, legally speaking, how did Halloween 2018 get away with the title Halloween? So in America, there is no mechanism to copyright a title. Now, it gets a little complex here, but because Halloween is an existing holiday that's in the public consciousness, you or I right now could make a film called Halloween and release it. The problem becomes if we are trading on the copyright, someone else's copyright. So in other words, we would have to go so far out of our way to make sure everyone understood that we were not involved with the film that everyone associates with that title. That it would make it pretty much impossible to actually do in practice. But technically, if you're the rights holder of the original Halloween, you can title every film that comes out ever again that you make Halloween, and you don't legally have to do anything about it. It's just how it is. They licensed the title and they could go forever. But technically, you cannot copyright a title. Now, there's cases where if you were to make up a word that doesn't exist in the English language, then someone couldn't use your title. And that would be because it doesn't exist in the public consciousness. And there's no way not to trade on the recognition of that film or that property. Stixa says, you're a pretty damn big of Mice and Men fan, though. I'm a bigger of Mice and Men fan than I am a Demon and Reggie show fan. That's probably true. All right, I want to show you guys a few things on the stream. I think you'll have fun. We've been going for 50 minutes here. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. That is the 25th anniversary laserdisc of Night of the Living Dead. This is the Elite Entertainment release that remastered the film. Before this, it was only available as a grainy, washed-out print, the way you saw it probably on UHF originally. But here's, I think, one of the most mind-blowing things is that when I first opened this, I could not believe the color cast photo. This thing has liner notes by Stephen King, Sam Raimi, Tom Savini, and George Romero. This was revolutionary for this movie. This brought this movie back to absolute life. And I own this film on Blu-ray. If they put it on 4K, I'd probably buy it again because it's just such a cornerstone. I will never get rid of this release, though. I will never get rid of this release. Let me see. What are your thoughts? Steak Sauce says, what are your thoughts about an Arsenic and Old Lace reimagining? The idea of making it a much darker film. I've always thought the idea had merit. Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. You need really strong actors, right? Really iconic, strong performances. Chris Lake Counselor says Halloween Kills and Ends will be November 1st movies. Maybe. I've read a few places that because all the movies that were supposed to come out in spring are now late summer releases, that the fall is going to get crowded with all what was late summer releases. So there's a chance we're looking at Halloween pushed off a little bit further than November 1st. You were talking about chronology. You weren't talking about release. I apologize. I just caught on. Stick Sauce says, Jamie, the Death Days films are excellent in my opinion. I like them. I like them. I think the second one is weaker than the first because it goes for the sentimental stuff for the final act, which I don't think completely plays, at least not for me. But you know what? It's a new franchise. Hard for me to be very angry at that. Russia's Ashes says, nice. I'm assuming that's about the Night of the Living Dead release. Yeah. Steak Sauce says, saw them both in theaters twice. I saw both of the Happy Death Day films once in theaters. That was enough for theaters, but I enjoyed it a lot. Darren Burrows asks, Madman or The Burning? I'd go Burning. Madman is one of those films that you watch every 5 years, have a lot of fun with, and then you kind of like leave in the dugout for a couple games, right? I think that's the sane move. But Burning, you can watch a lot more regularly. Chris Light Counselor 77 says, how many physical media versions do you have of Jason X? I have an individual DVD. I have the Blu-ray box set, and I have a I think I still have a VHS copy. I think. It's probably in a box somewhere, though. So that's it. I'm not going to ever try and collect every version of something. It's just, to me, I own the movie. It looks great. I'm happy. I'm pretty much done. Stu1. Hello, Stu1, by the way. Hi, I saw Cabin in the Woods for the first time yesterday. I was pleasantly surprised. Do you think there'll ever be a part 2? There will not be a part 2 through no fault of the film itself. It's just a project that works really well as its own insular universe. And the talent behind it really don't need to trade on it. So I don't think there'll ever be another. It's a great film. Jamie and I were talking about Cabin in the Woods at one point a couple weeks back. Another laserdisc I want to show you. This is the pilot episode of Millennium. If you know me, you know that Millennium is, in my opinion, overall the best television series ever on television. It got overshadowed hugely by X-Files, but for the horror fan, it is pure gold. And the second season finale of this show featured a pandemic that wiped out most of the United States. Just saying. Okay. Steak Sauce says, have you seen that awful Night of the Living Dead 30th anniversary release where they filmed new footage and spliced it into the original? I have. And I actually bought it on the day it was released because I kind of knew a guy who had worked on the new footage. And he told me this is going to be awful. This is going to be a train wreck. But I remember being excited, you know, a guy who knows a guy. It's always fun. Yeah, they're bad. The priest character is awful. The new scenes don't blend. It's bad. It's just bad. I would think that at some point it's going to become a collector's item that people are searching out madly, though. So if you own it, I'd say don't sell it because it's probably going to be worth some money. Chris Lake Counselor asks, would you buy a 4K Friday the 13th box set in the future? I don't think that is in our future necessarily. Paramount has not been overly interested in these titles. Even licensing the titles is not a top of hat for them. They just don't really care about the Friday the 13th. They never have. Remember, they traded away the rights and never used them, for instance. I mean, it's just not something they can totally grasp as part of their catalog. Would I buy a box set? No, probably not, because there's certain titles I would never watch. I own, that I own on other formats. If I own a Blu-ray copy of something and I've watched the Blu-ray once since I bought it, I don't need to buy it on 4K. Now, would I buy the original film? Yeah, that's a day one purchase. Would I buy Final Chapter? Absolutely. I think Jason X would look awesome in 4K with just that lighting, that set design. I think it would be beautiful. Remember, that film was shot by John. The director of that film was David Cronenberg's director of photography for all of his classic work. People love to bash Jason X, but if you're sitting there saying it's poorly made, you're not paying attention to what's on screen. You're just not. Jamie says, they can't make a Cabin in the Woods sequel. In my opinion, the world ended at the finish of the first film. Yes. With the world that they defined into existence, yes. Steak Sauce says, the priest character is so awful. Yeah, he's like 14 playing 35. I used to borrow it on VHS from the library when I was a wee lad. Unfortunately, I remember it coming out, and I was not a wee lad when it came out. Sir. Cole is gay. Hello, Cole is gay. How are you? Lauren, I hope you're doing well, sir. If you could have a donut with one director, who would it be and what kind of donut? Thank you. I'm not the biggest donut guy in the world, but I'd say just probably a vanilla frosted donut. With William Castle, because I have serious questions for William Castle about his later films, the ones that people don't talk about. Darren Burrows says, what's your favorite bad movie? Mine's Pieces, 1982. Yeah, well, that's a good choice. I like a lot of bad movies. I'd have to really think about it, because here's the thing, guys. I mostly don't have that many films that I watch all the time that are bad movies that I just keep revisiting. There's films that I'm really fascinated by that are bad that I keep revisiting. Exorcist 2 is an example of that. I can never find anything I like in the film, but I've watched it way too much in my life. I don't know. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. It's a good question, though. I appreciate it, though. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, are we likely to get a Friday the 13th sequel or prequel involving Pamela Voorhees? I think there's a very good chance we're getting a legitimate remake domestically of the first film in sooner than you would think. And by that, I mean probably within the next 2 years. I think there's a very, very good chance of that. I don't think we're getting a prequel. I think a prequel doesn't add anything is the problem. And I don't think the fan base wants it. And the general film community, the general audience who are not really into Fridays would walk in and be really confused and disappointed very quickly. So, and I have one condition. If they ever put Pamela Voorhees back on screen, she must be played by Amy Steele. That's my rule, because that makes the end of part 2 make so much sense and work so well. But if you cast anyone else, I'm kind of out. Steaksaw says, I think Jason X would look great in 4K. You're right, sir. I'd like to see them fix the CGI in Jason X, though. Yeah, the thing is, they couldn't escape the budget. So the crash into the space station is bad. It's a rough scene. And the nanobites, the little nano organisms that heal Jason are, they're not the best. But you know what? They're not the worst either. It works fine enough inside that world. The space station sequence, I would fix. But then again, the movie is what the movie is. I'm kind of happy with it as is. I can deal with the scene. It's funny. It works. Nicomenda says, what's your favorite non-universal Lugosi? Mine's the Devil Bat. It was a whole new experience after Kino cleared it up. It wouldn't be Devil Bat. I think Devil Bat is fun, but I really have to think about that too. I'm not extraordinarily happy with myself tonight for not having an instantaneous answer for you. I don't know. I'll get back to you. Lugosi's best work are all Universal films. That's the problem with your question. Okay, Steak Sauce says Children of the Living Dead is fascinatingly bad. Yep, I watched it a lot. But only finished it once. That makes complete sense to me. It's not very good. Jamie says The Exorcist 2 is my favorite bad movie. I mean, I love it. Have you ever seen the original theatrical version before they pulled it and tacked on the second ending? Because I prefer that like vastly. You can find it streaming. I think more by accident than anything. Jeff Overing says, "Hey Lauren, hello sir, how are you?" Stu1 says, "Lauren, you need more subscribers, or you're so good about talking about all this. I could listen all day. Now I have obnoxious coffee time and you. Cheers. P.S. Hi, Jamie." Well, I do need more subscribers. So again, if you guys can just start pointing people my way, that would be great. But really, I want a community. So it's like if I end up with less subscribers, but everyone's really involved, I'll be very, very happy. If I have 1 million subscribers and no one really is forming a community, they're just kind of watching and leaving comments like "great show," I'll be less happy. So the idea that I haven't been able to keep up with the chat tonight is really rewarding for me. So Jeff Evering says, "How are you tonight?" I'm pretty well. We've been going for an hour, so we'll go for a little while still. But I kind of hesitate to have too long of streams, especially when I haven't really planned out anything for you guys. But since you guys have the wheel and you're still interested, we'll keep going. Steak Sauce says, "Oh my God, that's a magnificent idea for Amy Steele." Isn't it though? I've been preaching this for so long, it's not funny. And she'd do it because I asked her. So I know she'd do it. Jamie says, "Hello, Stu 1. Yep, that's what we're talking about. Build that community, guys. Crystal Lake Counselor says, "What are your thoughts on the Blood Feast films?" The original Blood Feast, the Herschel Gordon Lewis film, it's fun to watch every once in a while, but the problem is that Blood Diner does everything it does better. So I found myself watching Blood Diner, which is a tribute to original Gordon Lewis that just blows his work out of the water. Now that, if you watch that film back in the VHS days, the sound was so bad that a lot of people couldn't watch it. But now that the digital copies are out and actually it sounds great, yeah. Darren Burrows says, "I'm the same. Exorcist 2 is so bad, yet it draws me back time after time." It's just one of those movies that you watch and you really can't believe it got made. Yeah, it's the voice of Darth Vader in a giant cosplay locust outfit talking about how people rub their wings together and that what causes all the evil in the world. I mean, it's definitely not Blatty. Definitely not William Peter Blatty. Baby Herman asks, "Who's your favorite character, not Jason and Kill in the Friday the 13th franchise?" Well, I love Melissa Aide's performance as Janessa in Jason X, but it would be a little dishonest for me to say that's my favorite. I probably would say that Alice from the original Adrian King's performance always has drawn me, and it's a big reason why I love the first film as much as I do. She's really good at being the heart and soul of that film. She's a final girl without falling in the tropes of the final girl, and yet she kind of set up the final girl for the decade. It's interesting to me. So let's see. Andrew says, "I love everything about Jason X." That is because you have good taste in Friday the 13th films, sir. Just don't mention 5. Jamie says, Darren Burrows, "I love the visuals so much." Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, "Wasn't The Fly in the works to be remade again? I hope not." It was, and what I read of the take on it was actually really, really intriguing. So I don't think it's actually going forward. So I'll just talk about what I read and keep grain of salt. I mean, the synopsis I read could have been wrong. They weren't going to do a physical transformation. He was going to get the psychological. He was going to psychologically mirror a fly. And I think that it's such a different take that it could have been very, very cool to do The Fly as a huge psychological thriller. But lest you think that it wasn't going to get gory, by the end of the film, we're basically telling the Jeffrey Dahmer story. I mean, it was going to be, the third act was going to be very grotesque. So I hope it gets back on its feet, because I actually think that sounds like a really good take. You don't want to just try and do what Cronenberg did again. And I do love the original film, and you can't do that today. I mean, you just can't do that today. So, Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, Lauren, is the alternative ending of Friday 3 completely destroyed? I would love to see it. Stills exist, and more than a few stills exist, suggesting that at some point this strip of film was used as a contact sheet. So it's possible it's still out there, but at this point, people have searched and no one's come up with it. So I tend to think it's gone. I tend to think Paramount never cared about these films. And as much as we hate the idea of like them just going to a dumpster and going to a landfill, I think that's exactly what happened. But like I've said a million times before, we can recreate them today. All these scenes we could have back. Yes, they'd be reshoots or digital, inserts. But in the case of 3, I don't really care that much because I think the film works as is. But like 7, there's nothing to that movie. There really isn't, besides the look of Jason. It needs its gore shots back. So I would not have a problem with digital recreations or simply reshooting the gore inserts. It wouldn't be very hard to do and make look right. Jamie says, I'm willing to bet I've seen both versions, Lauren, but I've not realized that I've seen that movie countless times. Yeah, sometimes the theatrical shows up on television during runs too. I recommend it. I do. I think it's better. And I use that word lightly because we all know what better means for Exorcist II the Heretic. Nick Mendez says, looking for a community. Piz was my gateway drug, which brought me to you and Christian Hannah, who are loving it. Well, that's what I'm trying to facilitate here. And again, it's not really about me at all, which is why, yes, all my videos do have a blatant plug for my books, but I don't spend my whole stream talking about buying my books, right? I want to build the community. I believe it'll come back naturally to me where I need it to, but I don't want to be the only voice. Christian's a great voice in the horror community. Raiho Magnifico is back in the game. At least his big toe is back in the game. He brings a lot of value. Monty is, a sorely needed return. We need Monty back because he's a great voice for the genre and for film in general. Cam, if you haven't subscribed to Cam's channel, Newt's channel, all this filming is healthy. You should do that. I'm on that channel every couple of weeks or so. Yeah, I want to build a network really of voices, and it's not mine. I just am trying to do my part to build it. Stu says, when I came to California last year, I visited Bila's grave with my girlfriend and left some flowers. It was very emotional. It was like I was standing next to him. Well, you know what, man? I'm good for you. I mean, Lugosi sometimes gets the short shift by modern viewers who think he's so theatrical. And the thing is, he was actually, for his time period, a very progressive actor, because if you look at a lot of the actors at the time, they go through those big mannerisms as if you were on stage, but they don't bring the charisma, the personality, and they don't beam that presence that he did. He had something to him that didn't just work for Dracula, because, Island of Lost Souls, which would be my favorite non-Universal Lugosi film, he is so friggin' good in that. So, hey, isn't that Devon Graham? That's my friend Andrew says, Blood Diner is my jam. I love it. Yeah. I have it on this disc set that has like 8 films or something. It's DVD, and it still looks so much better than the VHS and sounds like listenable that I've never upgraded to that Vestron copy on Blu-ray. I consider it, but I think the Vestron titles are so inflated in price. I just have a tough time convincing myself that those titles are worth, the better part of $30. I just don't see it. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, try watching Prom Night of VHS. Literally can't see a thing. Yeah, dude, I agree. That's where I saw about 3/4 of prom night on as a television broadcast, which was the same deal. But then I finished the film years later on VHS, and it's like that's one of the reasons why I don't fetishize VHS as a format like a lot of my peers do. It's just it was kind of insufferable at times. It really was. So as much as people talk about, oh, this is how this film should look because this is how I grew up with it, dude, I don't know if that's really real. I don't know that I can really buy into that. That said, I do have a video coming at the end of this month, which is going to take you to my collection of dead formats, and they're not the dead formats you suspect. There'll be no laser discs shown on that video. It'll all be true video obscurities. So stay tuned for that. That should be a fun video. Stu one asks, are you a fan of Ed Wood movies? Some of them. So I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I love Plan 9 from Outer Space, but I can't watch Orgy of the Dead. There's just no movie there. So I love the idea of Ed Wood, though. I love the idea of a guy who believed in himself despite the fact that no one else did or should have believed in him. But yet he still got one of the biggest movie stars of all time in his movies, even if he didn't know how to use them. And he got films made that were incredibly ambitious. When you have no money, your first thought isn't, how do I put, flying saucers over DC? But a guy like Ed Wood said, that's what I want to do, so we're going to find a way to do it. And yeah, the movies are atrocious in most ways, but you know what? He made his movies. He wasn't a guy who died saying, I wish I had. He was a guy who died saying, I gave it my best. And to that, I have endless respect. So, Heartbreaker, make your fan film. Steaksaw says, I have no doubt in my mind that all that footage got trashed. That's how I feel too. I mean, weirder things have happened, but it's kind of like London After Midnight. We all want it to exist still. But I think we all need to just wake up to the fact that there's never going to be a reality show where they hunt it down and find it intact, It's just not going to happen. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, Lauren, was there ever an idea of getting all the survivors of the Friday series, including Tommy, hunting Jason? I think everyone's had that idea. Cam and I were talking about it on his show, and I don't think you have to get all the survivors. I think you could just get Amy Steele and Tom Matthews back, and that kind of serves the role. That does it. But if you could get others back, that'd be cool. I just don't think some of the survivors bring much. Rennie from 8, what's she doing? I mean, yeah, you could do some new interpretation of her, but then you have the Halloween 2018 problem, which is that it's no longer the character we knew from the original film. And I don't think there's any value to that. I believe that Jenny could be out there and be convinced to go hunt Jason down. I definitely believe Tommy could do it. The rest of them, I'm just not convinced it really makes much storytelling sense, and it'll just feel like a lot of fan service. But I'm a big proponent of the idea that there's a good story to be told, in every story. There's a best possible version of that story out there that would make it work. So if the right writer and director gets involved and the right producer who has the right approach to the material comes involved, I think a Survivor Girl reunion film would work really well. It's not going to happen, though. Spoilers. The rights are just not in a place. Even without this lawsuit, then the rights would be just nightmarish. Steak Sauce says, Raiho. Correct, sir. See, I keep singing Raiho's praises. And it's funny because if you watch the Sausage Factory reruns, our former show, Raiho and I don't really interact a whole lot on that show. I was watching a few episodes not that long ago, and I was like, kind of, he and I don't really ever, tangle. We never dance, and that's something that when the new incarnation of the show starts back up, we need to change, because I have like huge respect for Raiho and what he brings to the table. He's the right kind of film fan. He's exactly the right kind of film fan. And Steak Sauce says, heart. But I really don't play that way, but it's cool. I'm open. Horde Films. Hello, Horde Films. Says, is it possible to get Friday 2 uncut? Was the bed scene the only cut death? No, it was not the only cut death. Almost all of them were at least slightly trimmed. The bed just lost entire shots, but everything was trimmed slightly. So for years, I heard that the Greek VHS tape was longer. That seems to have been debunked, and I believe that it is not true. So please do not spend, $300 on an import of the Greek VHS tape. But for years, that was the rumor. Again, I just think it's gone, guys. I hate to say it. You got them on as bonus features on the disc, and I think that's as best you can do. Someone could probably splice them together, but Paramount doesn't care that much. That's all there is to it. Say what you want about the New Line films. New Line has treated the Friday 13th franchise way better than Paramount ever did. Baby Herman says, Lauren, what is your favorite kill in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise? The kill, my favorite kill is probably when the producers at New Line said, we don't need to make these anymore. Yeah, I only like the first film. It's the only film that I legitimately like. The second film I find okay-ish. So if I'm in the right headspace, I can watch the second film and get something from it. But I mean, I really don't like Dream Warriors Onward. I don't like all the dumb fantasy elements. I don't like the jokiness of it. I don't like Freddy not being a dark character anymore. I hate all the really rubbery special effects. I'm not a fan of that stuff. I like my horror to be a little bit grittier and dirtier. And Freddy in later installments feels like an MTV product because he pretty much was an MTV product. So my favorite kill in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, probably Tina's bed death, where she spirals up to the ceiling and gets gutted and falls down in an insane amount of blood, sprays everyone in the room. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, what was the point of the girl on Friday 3 being pregnant, except for the fact that Jason kills a pregnant woman? I don't know. I don't know. I think it was just kind of establishing that, premarital sex. A lot of the later Friday directors, and even not the threes later, but a lot of the Friday directors after Cunningham kind of believed in the rules. Cunningham clearly didn't. There's nothing in his film that follows any preordained rules for characters. But in some of the sequels, they exist. But I will give the film credit for not making it an explicit point. Like, it's mentioned that she's pregnant, and then they leave it the hell alone, which is a really good idea. Nick Mendez says, one of the great movie-going experiences I've had in the past 5 years was seeing The Raven 35 of the Egyptian in Hollywood. Well, damn you. You didn't invite me. Sold out screening. That's encouraging. And Bilo was cheered like a rock star, as he should. If you have not seen The Raven, people, The Raven is so good. The Raven is, it has Saw-like traps. It's more than just The Raven. It's a lot of different Edgar Allan Poe set pieces. It's tremendous. It's about Karloff and Lugosi fighting for supremacy, and it's amazing. It's great. It is on, I believe, you might need to check this, but it's Scream Factory put out the Universal Horror Collection Volume 1. I think it's on it. If it's not on 1, it's on 2. And it looks great now. So I do recommend that set, even though they pissed me off with the announcement of the 5th set. Andrew says, I love the aesthetic of VHS and it's nostalgic, yes, but no chance in hell I prefer it over a master. Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, I'm really grateful VHS existed, obviously, because it brought home video into our world for real. Laserdisc actually upped the ante, and I'm glad we have these dead formats, and I'm glad they died too, by the way. I don't want to see all physical media die, obviously, just like you don't, but the reality is that all these stepping stones have led us to a place where we demand better quality from the studios that are releasing these films, even among films that, believe me, they wouldn't think to remaster or to clean up the audio or anything. They just, in the past, I mean, the VHS years and the beta years, the CED years, they would have just thrown out, camcorder off a screen quality transfers. And that's not acceptable anymore. And the only reason it's not acceptable is because we have supported better formats every time they've introduced them. So, Steak Sauce says, I only enjoy VHS for stupid reasons, that sort of hissing noise and the old FBI logos, etc. But it is objectively an awful way to see a movie. It is, and in its time, it was great. And it's okay to acknowledge all those things. It's even okay to acknowledge that you just like watching films like that for nostalgic reasons. What I find like a little dishonest is people who say that it's better to watch the films in those formats, because then you're not actually watching the film, you're watching the inside of your own head. That's how it is. Twin Peaks Coffee Time. Hello, sir. I have a close friend who says VHS is the superior format for watching movies. He's not that good of a friend, then, if he's spreading that kind of fake news to you. You know, he needs a government job. Stu1 says, speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, do you have any insight into any new ones coming out? Or what's your thought on the future of the franchise? Well, there is a future to the franchise. The Craven Estate already has a handshake agreement with Warner/New Line. And the question now is, do you get Robert Englund back for one last go-round? Understanding that you can't build a franchise off of one last go-round. Or do you recast it? There's been some names suggested in official capacity suggested, and some of them actually I think could be really good choices. I will tell you that this will not be a Kevin Bacon situation, though. They are going to cast it with someone who's either very identified with a currently popular horror character, or it'll be a younger actor. But I don't know that. I don't know anything more than that. I just know that they're going to make a long play out of this. They want a new franchise. They don't want to make one film and just be done. Steak Sauce, Amy Steele and Tom Matthews would be magnificent. I really believe so, and they're both down for it. I mean, Tom Matthews is making awesome fan films with Womp Stomp Productions, and Amy Steele has literally. I asked her the question, would she come back to play Mrs. Voorhees, and she said yes. And I said, well, would you just come back? And she said yes. So she'd do it. By the way, she was in Millennium. She was in an episode of Millennium in the late 90s, and she looked the same as she looked in Friday the 13th Part 2. And if you see her now at a convention, she doesn't look the same, but she looks incredible. Now, I'm not going to say incredible for her age because that's demeaning. She just looks incredible, period. Do you listen to, Steak Sauce says, do you listen to the Halloweenies podcast at all? I never have. I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts, to be completely honest with you. And when I do, I kind of listen to one because of the subject matter and then go to the next. I guess like everyone else on earth, I do listen to my Joe Rogan, but I'm not the most loyal listener of a lot of things because I haven't found, again, my community. Which is, the Sausage Factory thing was always great for me because that was a community. But now it's time for that community to grow. And you guys are the key to that. Absolutely. Heartbreaker says, it doesn't matter why that she was pregnant in Friday the 13th. She just is the only reason why it matters. She is. That's the only reason it matters. Stop looking at things in the Friday the 13th. Directors don't care. So that's not really how films get made, though. I bet in one draft of the screenplay there was some kind of point beyond to it than just a character detail. And it's a remnant. It's a phantom limb left off of an earlier version. Twin Peaks Coffee Time says, putting a SCART in the back of the TV for me was a religious experience from a VHS player. The picture quality is something to behold. I kind of wonder if we were to take a modern television, a modern 4K television back in time to the 80s and put it in front of someone, what they would think of it. Because I have a feeling that they would think the picture is bad. I think we've slowly acclimated ourselves to digital pictures, but I think it would be really jarring for someone who had never experienced a digital display to see a digital display for the first time. I have a feeling they would prefer the traditional cathode ray tubes. I just do. Crystal Lake Counselor asks, do I own any of the Friday 13th finals? I only own the original the original Part 3 release from the 80s. I don't own any of the modern reissues. Chris Lake Consor asks, better visionary, Hitchcock or Price? Are we talking Vincent Price? Because they're visionaries in very different ways. Andrew says, Lauren, even though it was prevalent when I was younger, I have no recollection of it. Who actually bought laserdisc? I understand it was very expensive and that people had widescreen TVs. We did not have widescreen TVs. Everything was letterboxed. I did. I mean, I bought laser, but I didn't buy, just like today, I didn't buy everything on laser. If something came out and I loved the movie and I thought it would look great in the format, I bought it. So, for instance, Natural Born Killers came out. The director's cut was available on laser. I jumped on that. I didn't even consider VHS because it was visually a movie that the best possible look, right? A film like Glengarry Glen Ross, which is about deep colors and just a really stable picture, makes that film look amazing. It was a Laserdisc title. But then there was plenty of titles that they came out, and I was like, VHS is fine for this because it's cheaper, and as much as I'll watch it, that's fine. And the same thing's true of today. I buy DVDs. I have to look at how much I'm going to actually watch the movies. I'm not a collector because I want to own plastic. I want to own film. But sometimes you have to be okay with inferior formats than the best format out there. If the film is just not going to be something that you watch enough, I'm not sure in every case you need to own the $35 Blu-ray special edition. At least for me, it's about knowing a film's place in your collection. But I got to say, on my current television, which is a great LG, with the settings in proper place, DVD upscaled looks really good. Like, it's not Blu-ray quality, but it's way better than even the broadcast high def. So I think it depends on I think it depends on the person, but for myself, a format is not the biggest deal. Chris Lake Counselor 77. I miss walking through mom and pop video stores. I just miss walking through video stores at this point. I agree with your overall point that mom and pops were amazing. There's a couple around me that I grew up with, whether we're talking about Popcorn Video, which is my local guy, who it was a very small shop, or we're talking about Shiva Video in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which had everything. To them, when I was a little bit older, going to New York, go to Kim's Underground on St. Mark's Street, right on the corner of 8th and St. Mark's, right? And they had all kinds of imports and bootlegs, and I mean, if you'd make connections there, and you'd get stuff that was never going to be available. And I saw VHS copies of things that just never will be available from that place. Horrid Film says the best thing about VHS is the artwork. Well, I would say that that's true of Laserdisc too, right? Scott Matthew, they need to make a sequel with Jason Voorhees' mother as the lead and doing all the killing, not a remake. Well, pitch that idea, because Victor Miller could legally do that. Jamie says, I missed that too. Crystal Lake Counselor 77. My high school sweetheart's parents owned one, and I saw literally everything in it. Glorious memories. Scott again says, what about a movie with the big three and Michael Myers, Jason, and Freddy? I think eventually something like that will happen, but I think that's still quite a ways down the road. Steak Sauce says, the only Joe Rogan episodes I listen to are the Tim Dillon ones. Can't stand Rogan otherwise. I like all the kooky stuff. I like when he talks about all the stuff I don't believe in. So when he does episodes about chupacabras and UFOs and ghosts and cryptids, I love all that stuff. I don't believe in any of it, but I love hearing him talk about it. Twin Peaks Coffee Time says, I miss the smell of video stores, a mixture of plastic tapes, brute, and sheer excitement. So Popcorn Video, that store I grew up with, the little mom and pop that was really a little mom and pop, he actually had a popcorn maker in the store, and every time you walked in, you smelled popcorn. I don't have a sense of smell, and I didn't then either. So I only know that by my parents and my sister's reaction while walking in. And I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Vanderhoff asks, have you seen the ultra sleazy gory horror film 2008's Gutterballs. I have. I kind of wish I hadn't. Twin Peaks Coffee Time. Great to see you doing a live stream, Lauren, and I enjoy seeing. And I enjoy. Let me try that all over. Great to see you doing a live stream, Lauren, and I like seeing you enjoying my sophisticated humor. Again, we got to build a community here, guys. We got to be on everyone else's wavelength. Heartbreaker. Hitchcock is definitely a better visionary. He had made so many different films throughout his career. Most of them you cannot even tell he directed, which is awesome. I can pretty much I haven't seen everything Hitchcock has made, so I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I usually get a pretty good sense of him as an auteur, right? I think his visual imprint is pretty solid. Heartbreaker says, you know that most people buy DVDs and not Blu-rays, right? 73% of movies are bought from DVDs. Yep, it's absolutely true, which is the reason that Walmart is going down to basically end caps for new releases and getting rid of all catalog releases. And the reason for that is that in the last 13 years, physical media has lost 83% of its sales. New releases and now amount for 90% of sell-through. So, whereas in the past, evergreen titles, which are those titles like Jaws, for instance, or Back to the Future, things that never stop selling, right? Used to be a more like 25 to 30% of the market, but they've collapsed. Those titles have become streaming titles almost exclusively at this point. So what it's coming down to is you're going to see in the near future, we walk into a Walmart's electronics section, you're going to see a single end cap of new releases, and they'll mostly be DVDs. Blu-ray is actually the most vulnerable category because they have to be on sale to sell, which means the retailers are cutting out their profit. But they don't sell enough to really overcome the small margin. 4K actually, because it has a margin, because you don't have to really put it on sale, has a built-in profit margin, but you don't sell very much of it. Whereas DVD has both. It has the profit margin and it has the sell-through at this point. Although it still has lost 83% of its market. And asking any business to survive on a fraction of what they used to, you got to face facts. At some point, you got to realize that this game will not make financial sense for the companies producing the discs. We will lose physical media at a certain point. It doesn't matter. And all the excuses about, well, I live in an area where there's not fast enough internet for streaming. Since when has company said, yeah, but we'll take a loss? That's because you're right. I don't want to cut you out. It's not going to happen. The companies are just going to say, well, I guess that's AT&T's problem, or I guess that's, whoever your service provider is. Russia's Access says, you were right, man. I only stopped using a Tune TV less than 10 years ago. Yeah, well, you still, on a traditional cathode ray tube television, you can still watch field sequential 3D movies, which you can't do on the high def screens. So if you want to see the original Friday the 13th, Part 3 in its original 3D, you can get that film on a UHD disc from Japan. It'll cost you about $150. Get a player, which will probably cost you about $90, and you might have to replace some belts. And you can watch it in the comfort of your home in its original 3D format. It's something you cannot do on high def. Jamie says, hello there, Scott. Absolutely. Make sure you hold your friends close. It matters, guys. Steak Sauce says, UFOs are real now, Lauren. Government says so. I haven't trusted the government in my life thus far, so I'm not going to make an exception on this one, sir. I am a libertarian for a reason. Sue1 says, with your favorite films being from the 1930s, do you ever look into the 1920s German Expressionist films? And do you class The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as the first true horror movie? No. Devil's Castle is the first true horror film. It's one of the first films, period, that was commercially screened. It's real short, but is undeniably both a horror film and it listen, the problem with saying what the first is in anything is that someone will make an argument, right? So we can talk about like what's the first slasher, and people say, well, Psycho, and other people say, well, Peeping Tom came out a month before in Britain. And then I'll come in and say something like hey, you know, the 1933 film Night of Terror is absolutely the first slasher film. In fact, you know that scene from Night of the Creeps, whereas the two, you know, kids on Lover's Lane are on Lover's Lane, and the madman comes out of the wood with the axe, and he brings it down, and they cut the camera right as he would be hitting the kid. That exact scene is in Night of Terror in 1933. Like Fred Decker took it wholesale. So my whole point is not to say that Night of Terror really is the first slasher, because I'm sure someone will come up with something from the 20s. The truth is, we've lost half the films that existed between the beginning of cinema and 1950. Half of them are gone. They're lost to time. No existing prints. So we can't really definitively answer any of these questions. But I like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari a lot, though. Although I'm not the biggest fan of silent films, as much as I love Golden Age, there is something to be said for the fact that I am a very audio person. Music is a big part of my life. Silent film is tough for me. I did pick up the drier release of Vampire from Criterion, and I do like that movie quite a lot. I do love the original Phantom of the Opera. I love Nosferatu, and I went to go see it with a live band back in October. But in general, I'm not the biggest fan of silent film. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, will a Halloween documentary like Never Sleep Again and Chris Lake Memories ever be produced if needed? Maybe the question there is, you know, I feel like Friday the 13th, the reason it has as much respect as it does from the community is though we can talk about our favorite and least favorite titles, and the truth is it's been very consistent, and it hasn't had a lot of hard reboots and restarts. It doesn't have all these splinters. It basically has one. It has the remake that stands apart, right? And you could argue that, you know, Jason Goes to Hell is kind of an alternative mirror reality from the rest of the series too, but it's amazingly consistent for what it is. I'm not saying it has continuity, because it has problems with its continuity, but Halloween is a different animal. It's all over the place. I don't know if anyone is really that interested in producing something absolutely definitive about it. I don't know, but I would watch it, that's for sure. Scott says, Lauren, I think Exorcist 2 is overrated as fuck. Don't get me wrong, it's entertaining, but just lacks in so many ways. What do you think? I think it's not William Peter Blatty. I think it's a fascinating disaster. I think everyone who loves the film understands what it is. I don't think that anyone can come to that film without at least a little bit of irony in their heart. But I won't lie to you. There's scenes in that movie that make me just almost cry in laughter, because not because they think they're funny, but because someone thought it would be okay to film those scenes. It's a baffling film. Twin Peaks Coffee Top says, Scott, Exorcist 2 is roundly dismissed as stupid rather than overrated. However, I like it. Again, I keep going back to it, so it's impossible for me to really cast judgment on anyone who likes it, because I watch it way too often. I do regret that when I was able to speak with Blatty, I did not ask him about it. I figured it was one of those things he'd probably talked about enough about, but Stu says, Devil's Castle, thanks, I'll look into that. I don't think it's on YouTube, but I know that Daily Motion used to have it up. It's been years since I looked, but that's where I would direct you. Steak Sauce says, one of the best scenes in the movie. Heartbreaker says, what are you talking about? Exorcist 2 is one of the most hated horror movies of all time. I've only met one other human being that likes it in the movie. I think you'd find more people than that in the chat who like the film. But like I'm saying, no one thinks it's a masterpiece. It's just a film that a lot of people gravitate towards because, you know, I mean, it's kind of like when you receive someone else's junk mail, right? You know, it's technically a crime to open something addressed to someone else, but it's junk mail, right? You can't not open junk mail and see, you know, I mean, it's not the good old days when that might be a record club where you'd get 12 CDs for a penny, but it's still going to be something goddamn interesting. Jamie says, well, I love that movie at Heartbreaker. There you go. You've now matched twice of your existent experience with the movie. Scott says, I don't think it's stupid. James, I just got fed up with the amount of fanboys that praise it. I think it's one of those movies that people get very vocal about liking, that people know there's flaws with, but they just pretend there aren't. We talk about one of those films all the time on this channel and on a different channel. I don't know if Piz is still out there. Nick Mendez says, I will defend the Friday the 13th remake until the end of time. And you should. I mean, the first 12 minutes of that film were as good as Friday the 13th ever was. The rest of the film can't hold up to it. I mean, it's definitely a step down after we get that past the opening credit. But I think it's solidly a middle entry in the franchise, but it's probably a high middle entry. It's better than people give it credit for. Christian has joined us, sir. Actually, it looks like you joined me a little while ago. Scott says, Lauren, do you agree that Hellraiser is superior to the original Exorcist? I do not agree with that. I would not agree with that. The original Exorcist is a masterpiece. I think Exorcist 3 is its equal. Hellraiser is a film that I want to like more than I do. I love Hellbound. I love the second movie. I think the second movie is a big, broad, gothic experiment that didn't have the money to do what it wanted to do and didn't care. But I love Hellbound a lot more than I like Hellraiser. Heartbreaker says, I'm going to get going. It was super fun watching you. I'm going to play some Fallout. I don't care what you're going to play, sir. I'm sorry. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, could a Fright Night 3 with Williams Ragsdale work today? So if you go back to interviews that were happening at the time of the second film, the idea was the third film was going to be the same characters finding a werewolf. So there was a point when that would have happened. Would it happen today? Yeah, I think so. But the problem is that remake came out and the sequel to the remake came out, direct-to-video, and they're kind of bad. I think they've bloodied the water for a while. I think eventually they'll probably reboot the whole thing again. Borderline 11 says, the 9th configuration is better than The Exorcist. No. I love 9th configuration. It's great. The novel it's based on, Twinkle Twinkle Killer Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, is a masterpiece. And Blatty directed the hell out of that movie, but it's not The Exorcist. But you know what? When we're talking about film of this class, who cares which one is better? If the world only existed of films of this caliber, my God, we'd be in a great place. Steak Sauce says, I agree with you about Hellraiser alone. You know what? Hellraiser is one of those things that gets so much right that the stuff it gets wrong feels so much more wrong. And I think that's sad. Like the bad optical effects you can forgive because it was a time, but the big sock puppet that comes out of the wall that's supposed to be the guardian of hell, I mean, it reminds me of the scene from House when we have the raccoon come out of the closet. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't work. I don't know. That movie, Hellraiser, I want to like a lot, but Hellbound, like, is all the things I wanted to like about Hellraiser, I got with Hellbound. And then the series, basically shit the bed because I think the third film is a missed opportunity, and it'd be better not to talk about the series after the third film. McLovin, Steak Sauce says, McLovin is Fright Night. Okay. Nick Mendez says, do you think Bava's Bay of Blood is at least a partial inspiration for Friday the 13th, or am I wrong to think so? No, you're definitely right. It's a bigger influence on the second film than the first, especially in the murder sequences. But what it comes down to, though, is that all these films owe their body count thriller status to Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians, which was not originally published under that title, and I can't say the original title or else this stream will get banned by YouTube. But if you want to find out something hilarious about how social mores have changed, Google what the original title of 10 Little Indians was, and then what they retitled it thinking they'd help their cause. 10 Little Indians is actually the third title for that book. Scott says, Lauren, I take great issue with the movie cover art for Ghoulies. People like myself were traumatized, and you couldn't sit on a toilet for years. Did this affect you in the same way? No. No. You hear people say, I couldn't take a shower after Psycho. I never had a problem. I was in the ocean not long after I originally saw Jaws, and none of that bothered me. Movies are movies. Movies are movies. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, will we ever get a release of Poltergeist with all the deleted scenes? No. No. So here's my take on Poltergeist, since it's the obvious question. I think what happened was very simple. Spielberg was a big fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He wanted to make a horror film. They had meetings. They were on page. It was going to be an R-rated film. There's sequences, you can find storyboards online of a demonic rape, for instance, that was going to be in the film. This was going to be a very different film than we got. At some point during the production, Spielberg's currency in Hollywood had raised to a point where it was clear that he needed to not release a hardcore horror film with a production with a producer's credit on it. So the film changed in production, but what was shot was shot. But there was definitely some differences of opinion. Some of the reshooting and some of the second unit shots were definitely more commanded by Spielberg, but where the film really changed was in the editing bay. I really think that you can really find a film in editing, and I think Spielberg found the film that we got today in editing. But Hooper's original vision was definitely harder. Again, just Google, you can find the original storyboards. I think you'll be shocked about what we almost got, because you think of Poltergeist as almost family friendly. His original vision was not. Okay, so Voltaire says, Clive Barker is an amazing writer, and you are right, sir. Although kind of misclassified. The Books of Blood, the short story eras where he was selling short stories to magazines, he was a great transgressive horror writer. And then he decided that he wanted, after Damnation Game, that he wanted to be a fantasy writer, and he really hasn't returned to the genre properly. I mean, I know that Scarlet Gospels is supposedly the return, but that book has a spotty history, and I think it's best just to take the glory days of his horror work, where short stories like In the Hills, the Cities, that just oh my God, they're great. They're truly great. Nick Mendez says, I know the Agatha Christie title. Pretty unfortunate. Yeah, it didn't age well, did it? You know, when you out racist some of the Lovecraft letters, you have problems. Stu One says the Midnight Meat Train is good Clive Barker movie. It is. I don't think it's rewatchable, but it's a good first time through. Steak Sauce obviously Googled Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians. All right, I'm going to run through these Laserdiscs, and then I'm going to get running, guys. Look at that. Cannibal Holocaust Laserdisc. At the time I bought this was the only way to get the movie uncut in America legally. This is it. Don't know what that is? That's because this is Deep Star 6 on Laserdisc. So this film was, to this day, has problems getting a release in the proper ratio aspect. This Laserdisc is in the proper ratio aspect, but the print is light. So the colors are all off because it's too light a print. But this is a prize jewel for me because I love Deep Star 6. All right. The Wax Mask on Laserdisc. This is the Japanese import. This was the film that began life as a collaboration between Lucio Fulci and Dario Argento. Lucio died early in the pre-production process, and Sergio Stivoletti ended up taking over the production. It's not a great film, but this was just unavailable for years and years and years and years. And I'm surprised it has not received some massive Blu-ray reissue in the States from one of the major players. And we'll just do one more. A film that was completely unavailable except this way. This is the Grindhouse Laserdisc release of Cat in the Brain, Nightmare City, Yeah. Tonight is not my best night. So Cat in the Brain, the Lucio Fulci classic, meta classic that gave birth to New Nightmare and Scream and Cabin in the Woods and every other film that was a horror film that commented on the horror film. It has plenty of problems as a film. but they're all overcome by the fact that it feels like mad genius the whole time. This is like some kind of weird drug trip in the form of a horror film. And at the time this disc came out, it was a godsend because it was just not, you couldn't get a hold of it except for really bad VHS bootlegs that were really not good quality, because the film is a big hodgepodge of different formats and ratio aspects, and this Laserdisc was a big deal for me at the time. All right, I'm going to read through what's there in the comments. When I catch up, then I'm going to say goodnight to you guys. Okay, Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, Lauren, I've been hunting for the Curse of the Poltergeist episode for years. Can't find it. Not on YouTube. Any ideas? No, I don't know. You mean the television series, right? You know what? Go on to Etsy. There's a guy on Etsy that sells bootleg television series, but he's changed his listings to be kind of, it usually you find things that look like legal listings, and then if you go to his store, there's all kinds of other stuff. He might be able to help you out, but I don't even know if he's still in business, to be honest. Stu says, I have a special place for Hellraiser franchise. I own all 10 movies. I think the later ones get too much hate. I'm glad there's someone out there to give them the love, because every misbegotten soul deserves a little bit of love. Just don't ask me to give it to that franchise. Although I'll say this, because Piz and I disagree about this. He says that the Hellraiser series went to darker, worse places than the Children of the Corn series, and I disagree with that. Scott says, Lauren, if the wrestler The Undertaker was to get married, do you think a good character name for his wife would be? So, I might be challenging YouTube's algorithm if I pronounce that word. But in reality, here's the deal. I don't know anything about wrestling or any sport, and I don't care. And for those people who might be upset that, is wrestling a sport? What I'd say to that is, as long as synchronized swimming is a sport, I'm fine with professional wrestling being a sport, period. Scott asks, Lauren, is that a green screen or is this your actual room? It looks really neat either way. This is a real place. This is flesh and blood. The Jason behind me is a full-size Jason that I partially constructed and have partially dressed. Everything in this room is real. I don't know why you'd think it was fake. At some point, I did a room tour that you should check out that video. And if you're not subscribed to me, man, make sure you are subscribed to me, because there's stuff you'll enjoy if you like this stuff. I've been doing a lot of memorabilia stuff recently because you guys seem to love that stuff. And if I pull all the boxes out of the closet, there's a lot of stuff to show you too. Stu says, do you watch those on Laserdisc or is it just for collecting? The titles that I don't own on any other format, like Wax Mask, yeah, I definitely watch that Laserdisc when I watch the movie. I don't watch it a whole lot. Deep Star 6, I actually found a streaming service that has a good letterbox print of it. It has problems too. I don't know why this movie has such a cursed existence, but I've been real tired of the Laserdisc for now. And obviously Kino Lorber is putting out a Blu-ray of it, and I'm fingers crossed, hopeful they'll do justice finally to this movie. Much like Cunningham's New Kids, it's had a horrible history of being misrepresented on home video. Nick Mendes says, Wax Mask. I have a pretty good Blu-ray of it. It's solid, and the production values are top notch. Cat in the Brain on the way. You'll love Cat in the Brain for the madness that it is. Is it a good film? No, but it is one of the most inspired pieces of creator-driven madness you're ever going to see. So I love it. Jacob McCullen says, what is your favorite Kathy Koja book? For me, it's a pop-up between Kink and Strange Angels. Skin is the answer to that question. But I'd say Cypher is a close second. Crystal Lake Counselor 77. Lauren, have you ever read the novelization of Friday 2? Fascinating chapter where we get into Jason's thought. I've read all of and own all of the novelizations. I'm missing a couple of the Black Flame books. That the recent ones, but all of the 80s and early 90s literary experiments I own, including the kids book series. I've shown those on the Sausage Factory. I should probably do a video where I show all the literary incarnations of Friday 13th I own. By the way, Nancy Kilpatrick's Jason X novels are awesome. And if you don't know Nancy Kilpatrick, she's a great writer. And I'm not just saying that because she once bought a story and ran it in one of her anthologies. Crystal Light Counselor 77 says, Lauren, have you ever read? Oh, that's the same thing. Voltaire says, what do you think of Ring versus Grudge film? You know, I thought that was going to be a epic disaster. And it's actually pretty decent. It's silly, but basically that movie has these little like mini remakes of the original Ringu and the original Juon. And then the third act is pretty much what you'd expect. And it's silly. Ghosts fighting is silly. But you know what? There's worse entries in both franchises. By far. I mean, they're really not. That film is really not bad. It probably shouldn't exist, but I'm glad it does. So I can't hate it. Steve. Hey, Steve. How are you? Have you ever been interested in horror video games? I'm not a gamer. Part of it is just that I grew up with things like Frogger and Pac-Man. I go back then. And then I was like removed from video games. We owned an Odyssey 2, if you know what that was as a kid. We didn't have Atari because that was more expensive. I had a long gap there, whereas most people got into PlayStation or that kind of thing, or Nintendo even. I missed all those years. So by the time I had nieces and nephews and they were into video games, the video games were like too much information, just too much hitting me. They looked like mini movies, but had that weird kind of Japanimation feel to the cutscenes and stuff. And it just it's not my thing, and I'm just at this point too old to pick up a new habit on it. I'm sure there's great stuff, but no. Rush's Ashes says you should do a video on the guitars and how do you record your music, your intro music, and make your videos. I could do my guitars. I won't do them at the moment, but there is my Bride of Frankenstein guitars right there. So actually, my Fender modeling amp, which is beside me, and I know the hardcore musicians just freaked out because, yes, I use a digital modeling amp because you know what? It's light and I can move it around the room. And it sounds really good because it's a Fender. So if I want to play Black Hole Sun, it sounds like Black Hole Sun. And I'm not a professional musician. I never will be. But the cool thing about the Fender amp is that it has a USB out, which I can run directly into my computer, and then I just use Audacity to record, and that's cool. And I use online synths for all the synth parts and the drums. I'm not a musician by any means. I just have fun playing around. Music is a big part of my life. I can play basic punk rock songs, and that's and Christmas songs. My atheist versions of Christmas songs. That's pretty much my musical. You want to hear a good musician, Christian Hanna's the place to go. Definitely. All right, you guys have just added a bunch more. Crystal Light Counselor 77 says more tolerable Friday 8 or Halloween 5. Halloween 5 by a landslide. Halloween 5 is a film that I eventually will do a storytelling autopsy on because there's a lot to say about what that film is trying to accomplish. And I think it's actually one of the bolder experiments in the late 80s horror cycle. It gets a lot of hate for just a couple of elements. And I think if we're looking at it a little bit wider, it's much better than it has any right to be. If they'd given that film a full production term to work with rather than the abbreviated schedule, I really think that movie would have a very different reputation. But I'll save the long version of that for a video eventually. Jacobs asked, why do you think Mario Bava doesn't get brought up in the same breath as Carpenter? Personally, I think he's the best genre filmmaker out there. Well, partially that's because we're in America. If you were in Italy, he basically gets more respect than Carpenter in Italy. Hard to say. I mean, definitely different tastes, right? I don't think Black Sunday is definitely going to play the way it plays for me, and I think it plays for you, to the person who grew up with 80s horror exclusively. But then again, I just look at them and say, You're living a life without a worship of Barbara Steele. I don't even know who you are. But to me, Bava is really, really, really crucial to the genre. And in the flyover years, which is what I consider the 50s and 60s, he was the brightest shining star. I mean, you look at his catalog, it's amazing. And the innovation. He was basically the George Lucas or the James Cameron of his time. He was figuring out how to do things on film that people literally looked at him and said, that's not possible. And he said, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to find a way to do it cheaply. And he did. So all the things we think of as from like Roger Corman or Charles Band, he was doing, but yet making films that looked really classy with great screenplays. Stu says, wow, that guitar is great. Yes, I had that guitar skinned. I've actually just fallen back in love with it. When I got it, I did not like the sound on it. It's the only Les Paul styled guitar I own, and I'm not a fan. I know that's going to piss people off. I'm not a Gibson guy at all. I'm not a Fender guy really, although I have my Strat. I am a Jackson guy. But I don't like all their crazy like Flying V and really metal guitars. My Monarch is my main guitar. But I like heavier guitars, even though I'm a smaller guy. I'm heavier than I should be, but I'm smaller. The Jackson stays in tune no matter what you do to it. I mean, you can put that guitar through hell. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, wasn't Tom Savini's original Death for Jason to microwave a set? He talks about that in interviews, but you know what this weird thing is? I've read like the shooting script of the film, and even from the shooting draft, there's no hint of that. I think he keeps there's the scene where the television gets broken over Jason's head and he gets electrocuted, and I always wonder if that's what he's referring to, but I don't know. Savini is an interesting cat. I've always had good experiences when I've met Savini. I'm the only guy I know that can say that. But he's always been really cool to me, so credit where it's due. But I think he went through a period where he talked a lot. So maybe some of what was said was from his perspective, but not perhaps from anyone else's perspective. Nick Mendes says, Jacob Bava was a total artist in my top 10. Yeah, well, he should be. He should be. I mean, remember, Argento came from the Bava school. Fulci worshipped at the ground that Bava walked on. There's a reason. Steak Sauce says, I'll quit when I catch up. Fat chance about. Well, I'm going to catch up eventually because I can't do this forever. Stu1 says, Kirk Hammett from Metallica has custom monster movie guitars as well. I wish I had one. Yes, he does. And I'm not the biggest Metallica fan. I like the first 4 records. Masters of Puppets is my favorite. Although I like Kill Them All a lot. I'm not the biggest metal guy. I'm much more punk and industrial and rock and roll. My favorite band of all time is a cowpunk band. So go figure. Jacob says, Black Sunday is my all-time favorite film. That is really heartening to hear, my man. And I really don't get 80s nostalgia. This might be a longer video now. I was born in the 90s. I have zero adoration for the 90s or early 2000s. I just like good films. That's even more heartening to hear. So here's the thing. When you talk about the 80s, you're talking about 2 periods in film. You're talking about the 79 to 84 wave. And then you're talking about, or maybe even 78 if you want to include the original Halloween. And then you're talking about 85 to 92, really. I like the first half of the decade a lot, and I have a lot of, I think I can make a good case for why I like all those films. But the last half of the decade, all the Elm Street derivatives and the cheapness of it, and the all the horror comedies that were based on one-liners, all that annoys me. And a lot of people look back at those films with a lot of reverence, and I cannot bring myself to do so. So to me, the 70s was a better decade by far than the 80s. But I get very sad when people can't look back at the history of the entire genre and really embrace films from other decades and other time periods, because I grew up in a world where I didn't even know the difference between, House of Frankenstein and The Exorcist. They were all part of the same world for me. And I think that helped me to find where my passions really lie in the genre. Whereas if I think I just liked films from a certain time period and wanted to collect all the films from a time period that I had experienced, that I would be not as well rounded. It feels. I'm currently trying to collect everything that I can from the 1930s, but that's a period that not only did I not experience, obviously, but I'm worried about those films going extinct, and that's why I'm doing it. Like, I don't see a digital streaming platform for all the non-Universal 30s films. If it didn't come out of Universal or RKO or a few of the Paramount titles, I'm really worried that these films are going to be lost to time, because if we don't become caretakers of them, I think they're gone. And I mean, if the 80s are your thing, I get it. I lived through the 80s. I didn't really love the 80s. I love the 90s as a time period to live much more than I like the 80s. But I have to say, like, there's some great moments in the 80s, but I won't worship the decade the way others do. Scott says, do one. They're overpriced because they have Hammett's name on them. Yeah, all guitars are overpriced, unfortunately. Steve says, it's okay. None of us are Gibson guys these days. Well, that's true, isn't it? It used to be a really common thing to hear, though, wasn't it? Scott says, because they're pricey and not that well made unless you get into the 2K range. Yeah, because, we'll just leave it at that, yeah. If they were all domestic still, maybe there'd be an issue. Maybe there'd be a different issue. Andrew says, Tom was very nice to my girlfriend when I met him. So that's the thing, though. He's really nice to all the ladies. It's the guys that tend to have problems. Jacob says, I'm in of the Italian horror filmmakers, he's top dog for me. I love you guys, man. You're hitting all the sweet spots here. Chris Lake Counselor says, Lauren, do you believe that Carpenter stole Bob Clark's idea for Halloween being a sequel to Black Christmas? Again, but the body count thriller thing isn't really, you can always find an earlier precedent. And some of those earlier precedents are now lost to time, but I don't think that there's anything about Halloween that's necessarily a ripoff of anything that came before. I just feel like, that formula was inevitable. And Carpenter was a great, great, great practitioner and figured out a really streamlined way to tell a tight narrative. It's not a perfect narrative. There's problems with that movie. And not the least of which is a kid that goes into, an asylum when he's 8 or something, but can drive a car across country at a time before GPS. But I mean, it doesn't matter because there's a logic to that film that feels like an urban legend, right? It feels like the spider eggs in the coat pocket, or the man with the hook. So it all works. Black Christmas is a tremendously great film, but I almost feel like it's a film that you need to watch 3 times before you really feel that movie. Whereas Halloween, you get the very first time. The full impact of Halloween is available to you the very first time you watch it. In some ways, no second or third watching is ever going to be as good as the original. Steve's still talking about guitars, which I'm sure some of you don't care about it in the least. Jacob says, how you feel about Halloween 5 is how I feel about Nightmare 5. I like a lot about what the movie's trying to do. Teen pregnancy, Alice is a better character, gothic imagery, etc. And David J. Shaw's screenplay exploited all that stuff before he was forced to revise it into the ground. David J. Shaw is one of horror's unsung heroes. If you saw the Creepshow series from last year, the episode where the guy finds the finger and brings it home, puts it in the refrigerator, and it turns into the creature, that's a David J. Shaw story, and it was the first time he'd been done justice after both the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Nightmare on Elm Street series did him wrong. Nick Mendes says, I was nailed to the 30s through 50s for decades and came to the 70s and on later in life. I feel like a kid, again, loving a whole bunch of horror, and my mind has been opened like an axe. Again, I'm not saying people shouldn't love modern horror. I love modern horror, but to not understand that a film like The Most Dangerous Game is as good as the horror genre gets, I don't get it. I mean, I here's the thing: like, people talk about Barbara Crampton, and I'm more likely to talk about Fay Wray. That's who I am. So there's something for all of us. But I think if we share and people go into everything with an open mind, I think we'll all end up to be even deeper in love with this thing than we are. Jamie says, all you guys play guitar. I like that. It's a guy thing. It definitely is. But I'll say this, I didn't for many years. Played when I was young, then gave it up. And then I found myself in a pawn shop that was next to a place I worked, and bought a guitar cheap that was broken, fixed it up, and retaught myself. I've never taken a lesson in my life. And if you heard me play, you'd believe it. Jacob says, I grew up watching older stuff and newer stuff simultaneously. I saw Frankenstein on TV, and my parents rented everything from 80 slashers to stuff like The Faculty, which is new at the time. Sounds very much like my experience, except I suspect that the television was in color. That would be the only difference between you and I. So it's all horror to me, he says. And, maybe that should be the name of my channel, because that's pretty true for me. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, Urban Legends, or I Know What You Did Last Summer. Urban Legends, but if you gave me I Still Know as a choice, I'd probably pick I Still, because I think that movie is hilariously misconceived on every level. So I love it for being this ugly duckling in the middle of this kind of annoyingly trendy fat slasher phase. There's something about that movie. I don't know. Stu One says, if you don't mind talking about your Linda Blair story when you met her, you mentioned on another video. So there's not much to say. She was just really unfriendly and dismissive. She only wanted to talk to people if they bought her vegan cookbook. She didn't want to sign anything that was basically from any of the films people wanted her to sign stuff from. If you walked up with a Cage Heat, one sheet or something, she told you no. And she was signing Exorcist stuff, but she was like rolling her eyes. And it's like, you're at a horror convention, woman. Come on. So yeah, she was really unfriendly and really unprofessional. And if you feel that way, you shouldn't do the conventions. Period. My worst experience. Piz will tell you to show her a photo of your pet, but at the point where you have to emotionally blackmail people you're paying money to sign a piece of paper, I don't want to even do it. I can't say I'm unhappy that I met her, but it's never going to be a good memory. Jamie says Urban Legends, definitely. Yeah. Russia's Ashes says, what human being with a soul doesn't love guitars? I don't think any of us have souls, actually. But that's a different topic entirely. Steve says, all right, I'll shut up about music. Maybe that's going to be a different video. Even Russia's been playing his through the whole video. That's very cool. Chris Lake Counselor says, Lauren, when you hear Jason Voorhees, do you envision Richard Brooker or Ted White? The answer to that would be Ted White. 4 was the first I saw in theaters. And, 10-year-old me my life changed that day. Friday the 13th Part 4 and Charles L. Grant's Shadows anthologies, those short story collections, those two things came into my life about the same time, and they changed me. They changed my body chemistry. My brain fires in a different way after that day than before. Jacob says, yeah, New Line flirted with splatterpunk writers like Shao and John Skip. Unfortunately, they never gave him a fair chance. Being a fan of Shao, you never get a hold of it. I'd love to get a hold of it. Yeah, the problem with the splatterpunk movement was it got very popular and then it burned out really fast. And today people use the word, but they're using it usually interchangeably with extreme horror, which is unfortunate. Chris Light Counselor 77 says, do you consider Predator a horror film? I don't, but it's horror adjacent. So my definition of horror is anything that tries to pull dark emotions out of the viewer / reader from the audience. And Predator really isn't about pulling dark emotions out. You're not really scared or frightened. It's an action film, and action films are about exhilaration, a sense of adventure, And I think that's what Predator really is. I love the Predator monster design, but I really have never fallen in love with any of those movies. Sorry, I know that's a weird thing for people, and people think I'm just being contrary because, like, I don't like Aliens, for instance. People think that I'm being less than legitimate with my opinion. I'm not trying to be provocative. Those things just don't connect with me. I like films that challenge me, make me uncomfortable, make me side with people I wouldn't normally side with. To give you another idea, the Mist movie. I don't like the Mist movie. I think it's boring for most of its runtime. It's a zombie movie where they just subbed in Lovecraftian monsters, and it really doesn't resemble the short story that it's based on, that some people call a novella, but it's not quite long enough for that. It really doesn't resemble that in actual context very much. But here's the thing. I love the ending because the ending challenged me. So I'll never revisit it probably, but I do like the end of that film a lot. Jamie's answering about playing guitar. She says she prefers to sing. And you know what? You should all check out her, is it Bandcamp? She has a hell of a good voice. She sent a link, and I was shocked. Just shocked. Steak Sauce says, Linda Blair is a raging alcoholic. Listen, I'm not gonna judge anyone, but I'm just saying, she lived a life with Rick James at one point. It takes a little something. Steak Sauce says, allegedly. Voltaire says, is The Witch a horror film? Of course The Witch is a horror film. It's the very definition of a horror film. Chris Light Counselor 77 says, I adore Psycho franchise, yet I've never seen Bates Motel. Would you recommend it? The TV show? I've never seen it. I couldn't help you. I don't do much television. Steve says, Lauren, have you seen The Lodge yet? It's getting a lot of praise. I reviewed The Lodge on my channel. The Lodge is a Hammer production, but it feels very much like an A24 production. It doesn't have as many layers as A24's productions, but emotionally it's as complex, and it's not afraid to go bleak. I like bleak films a lot. And I like films that have unhappy, unsettled endings. So, give me your Hereditary, give me your Witch, and I would definitely say The Lodge is in that class. Jamie says SoundCloud. That's where you can find her performances. And I just outed her, so hope all you guys actually conduct yourself like gentlemen when you go visit that. But I think she has an awesome voice. Steak says, I'm a hell of a singer myself. Okay. I don't want to really click that link, I don't think. Jacob says, how do you feel about horror so far this year? I've enjoyed The Platform, Ghost Stories, The Lodge, Invisible Man, Gretel and Hansel, and The Hunt to various degrees. Ghost Stories, the Indian film, is amazing. If you're talking about the American film, not so much. So the best film so far this year was Boot Part 1, The Ghost Ship, or The Haunted Ship, which you can find on Amazon Prime. It's the best thing so far this year. I did like The Lodge a lot. I like The Hunt. The Hunt was fun. Of the rest of the things, I haven't seen The Platform. Invisible Man, I'm so mixed on. It's like a C+ to me. If you want to give it a schoolhouse grade, there's some plot problems that I just can't get around. But I like Lee Winnell so much that I can't in good faith say it's worse than a B+, but it's got problems. It's definitely not a perfect film. But we're getting, a new wave of Universal Classic Monsters out of it, so I guess I should be happy. Steve says, okay, I'll check out your review. Please do, sir. Chris Lake Council 77 says, Lauren, what is your favorite novel? Depends what day you ask me, but I may answer that question, H.P. Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. I may answer that question, Legion by William Peter Blatty, or I may answer that question, Prototype by Brian Hodge. Steak Sauce says, Rick James is a Buffalo boy. He'll always be my Caucasian. Okay. Steak Sauce says, Jamie is a SoundCloud rapper. Not exactly. Chris Lake Counselor 77 says, I'm guessing we aren't getting a sequel to Behind the Mask. They've been talking about a prequel called Before the Mask, forever. I don't know. I'm not sure I care. I think that film works as its own thing. I think franchising it might be kind of pointless. I mean, there's probably something you could do with it, but I'm not sure I need more. And Jamie gets the last word. She says, I'm not much of a rapper, to be honest. It's my drunken one-take karaoke SoundCloud. And I think it'll impress all of you. So, guys, thank you for tonight. Thank you for dealing with my Laserdisc collection, and thank you for the chat and all the engagement here. It really means a lot to me, and I think this is exactly what I wanted to build here. I didn't intend to go twice as long as I, set out to, but I was never bored. I hope you weren't. We've had a pretty good response tonight, and these videos tend to get big watches afterwards. So, again, if you can do me a favor, send people our way. And we're only a few days away now from starting the interviews, the discussion series. Some great guests are going to come up on that, and I guarantee you're going to have some fun. But I want those chats to be active, just like tonight. So thank you all. Hey, Big Crack Rock, you just got here, I think, in time to hear me say goodbye. Everyone, have a great night. And again, go out of your way, man. If you meet someone through my chat, and you touch base, let's find a way to have you guys continue the conversation. Let's build something. Thank you much. I'm trying to move the mouse with my bad hand.